Hi, welcome to the Global Discussion. Interesting discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. Today's no exception. I'm delighted to say a returning guest on the show, Ulli Appelbaum. You're very welcome to the show, Ulli. It's great to have you back.
Thanks for having me, Simon. Excited to be back on your show. Really appreciate it.
Do you know, in all the episodes we've done, we've got very few people back, and I always feel guilty because we had some great discussions over the years, and I must get more people back on. But I'm just inundated with people who want to be on the show. I suppose that's a good complaint. But for people that's got an interest in all things marketing and brand, we're with one of the best here. So, Udi, before we start, do you
Thank
want to
you.
maybe tell people a little bit about your background, your company, and then we can get into some of the new topics since you were last on the show?
Yeah, absolutely. Ulli Appelbaum, as you can clearly hear, of German descent, but I live in the United States in Minnesota. Um, I spent most of my career in the account planning department of the top tier advertising agencies, first in Europe, Eastern Europe, and then since early 2000 in the United States. And 14 or so years ago, we decided to move back to Minneapolis, where we live now, for personal reasons, family reasons. I was expecting my third child at the time and decided to start my own company, a brand consulting firm, first the trousers, then the shoes. And as the name says, is we do strategy only, so we don't sell any execution. And as the name implies, we look at strategy as a creative problem-solving exercise. So there's a creative problem-solving element in it. Um, and I've been doing that for the now last 15 years, something like that. Working for a wide variety of clients, both from small startups, entrepreneurs launching new brands, to global companies like Siemens, selling multi-million dollar medical equipment, to packaged good, and over the last few years, more and more software companies that seem to have an increased appetite for traditional marketing expertise. So, and as I've been doing that for 15 years, writing now my second book. That's the trick to get on your show, Simon, is write books. So it was a pain to write my second book, but that led me back to your show. So I'm glad I did it.
Let's talk about the first book briefly, and then let's get into the second book. So, tell everybody about the first book because we did speak about that last time, if memory
Yeah.
serves.
So I'm actually putting the cart before the horse because last time the first book was the it was called the Brand Positioning Workbook, which is basically a methodology I'm using to develop brand positioning platform. And at the core of it is really to explore a brand positioning for a given brand. There are 26 sources of brand associations that you can explore to see, does it apply to my brand? Does it help me create relevance? Does it help me stand out in the category? Now, these 26 sources are based on the analysis of over 1,200 case studies. So it's not that I just made them up. Um, and the book was fairly successful. Thanks in part also for coming up, giving me the opportunity to talk about it on your show. But then I realized, okay, so I use the term brand associations. Maybe I should write a book about brand association because I realized that while a lot of people are using the term, a lot of the marketing thought leaders in the industry worldwide are using the term. There's not, or there hasn't been one single book on Amazon that has brand association in its title or that focuses exclusively on brand association. So I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. Everyone uses it. No one took the time to curate content about what brand associations are. And so I decided to be the one. So it's literally a curation of best-in-class scientific discoveries and evidence-based marketing to support, the concept of brand associations, but also that provides clear direction on what kind of association do you need, how do you build them, and stuff like that. So first book was my own experience, my own methodology. Second book is really just a curation of best-in-class thinking, knowledge available, currently available out there. So yeah, so I should have maybe started with the brand association and then my methodology, but you know how life goes. Sometimes you just do things upside down.
Well, it's great. And the book we're talking about is obviously The Science of Brand Associations. And the tagline for the book is Win Minds, win markets. That's something very close to my heart. And I like as well that you gave a little nod and you sort of dedicated the book in part to the marketing giants that you sort of mentioned in the book, which is a nice
Mhm,
touch to do.
mhm.
So we kind of know that you've written the second book, but what's in it, Uli? Like, if people are going to go out and get this book, why would they get it? What's in it? What's the value add the book gives people?
What it does, it basically gives you the science and data on how to build brands in the memory of consumers. That's what brand associations is, me trying to give it a distinctive name. What we're talking ultimately about here are memory associations. And from a scientific point of view, is a brand is really everything you've memorized about a specific offering and the feeling these memories evoke. That's what it is. It's a construct of memories in your mind. Without these memories, there is no brand. So one example I used recently in a presentation was, Simon, you're probably not familiar with the brand Jaja in Indonesia. You don't associate anything with this brand. Well, first of all, because it doesn't exist. I don't think so, at least. But second is, your brain is empty when I say that brand. But if I use Rolls-Royce, all of a sudden you have all these thoughts and memories that come to mind. So that's really what brands are. Those are like memories, network of memories, um, experiences, feelings associated with a specific offering. And thanks to science, we know how they come about, we know how to strengthen them, we know how to build them for them to come to mind at the moment of purchase. And that's where the subline of the book is Win Minds, Win Markets, is the notion here, which is well established in marketing now, is at the moment of purchase, when you are in a decision-making process, the first brand that comes to mind is the one that wins. It's the one you're going to pick. And the first brand that comes to mind basically just means it's the brand with the strongest network of associations that are relevant to your purchase occasion. Um, so that's really it. It's playing this game of who comes to mind first in a moment of purchase with the right association to help me choose that brand at that moment. So at the core, that's really what it is. And as I mentioned, there's so much science, so much evidence through quantitative research that is available, but that no one ever took the time to curate. So to come back to your initial question, what do you get out of this book? You get, some people call it the blueprint or the operating system of brand building, basically. And that's really what it is.
Well, that's really good. And I love the fact that it's got the neuroscience, it's got the cognitive sort of psychology, it's
Hmm.
got the evidence-based marketing. This isn't just something, put together on a whim. This has
No.
got the science that backs it up. And I wanted to ask you, and it leads me on to something that a lot of people are talking about at the moment. The importance of investing in brand today. A lot of my sort of marketing peers throughout the world are talking about it's never been more important to invest in brand and brand association because of the content explosion with artificial intelligence and synthetic content, synthetic people. The machines are almost feeding themselves now. They're producing content and then retraining themselves on it.
Mhm.
That must be part of the thinking here as well, Uli. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, I think you're correct, but I think it's also more and more difficult to break through this clutter, right? So, and these waves and waves of content that are thrown at us. And one thing you learn, and that again, it's the science of memory formation, if you want to, is if you really want to stand out or break through, is keep it simple, relevant, and consistent. So, in this wave of content, if you associate your offering with things that are relevant to consumers and consistently communicate this, you will win. You will not win maybe the, buzz of the day contest on TikTok, but that's not how you build successful brands long term. Um, but you will win the game over time on all the social media platform and in the public discourse, so to say, when you um, consistently and continuously share the same, try to create the same association with your offering over time. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that you gotta, repeat your advertising over and over. You can refresh it. You can, make a twist, do a twist on it to keep it fresh and memorable and interesting. But the content should always be the same. When you look at some of the very successful brands now, given they weren't built in a age of social media, but brands like Kit Kat, like Mars, like Snickers, and all, they're like, or like the Bears, the Diamonds. Those are brands that are 50, 70 years old. And for these 50, 70 years old, they were consistent in their communication, which in today's environment is mind-blowing to think about it. I mean, having a consistent piece of content for 2 days is already unseen or unheard of. You're like, okay, people are getting bored. We got to change that. But no, you gotta be consistent and relevant, of course.
Yeah, and what's interesting as you're talking, whether it's De Beers, whether it's precious gems and stones, or whether it's candy bars, uh, there's a an experience, there's connections that have been made in my head and in yours,
Hmm.
but then you've got new people that need to start building their own brand associations that
Hmm.
triggers their own recall.
Hmm.
And so that refreshing of content that you talked about, staying true, I assume, to the brand message and what the company's trying to do and achieve. But ultimately, I suppose, by taking that methodical approach and understanding that new consumers are coming through all the time, you've got to keep talking to you and I, but you've got to also be building these brand associations with new people.
Yeah.
And the brands that get this right then early, we're seeing those move ahead faster, getting better at beating their competition. Does it help when there's a downturn? That brand association, it's almost like a secret ingredient, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's a lot of data to support the economic value of it. There's data that shows us that strong brand associations today represent 80% of future sales of your brand. It's called brand predisposition. So, and why? Because not every consumer of a category is in the market this week. They might be in the market next week or next month, but you take those into account when you build your brand as well. There's a lot of data that support the fact that brands with strong brand associations get thought of first and therefore purchased first. So they're more successful, that they're better weathering recessions, that they're better supporting price premiums. So, I mean, I think I say it at the end of the chapter where I speak about the evidence. It's like, when you look at all the evidence behind strong brand association networks, it's a no-brainer to take that lens from a business point of view, from an economical point of view. Um, and the other point you made is highly relevant as well is, a brand, especially brands that live of newer generation of consumers, need to find ways to refresh their value, their salience, their relevance, while staying true to the core of the brand. It's forgot I write about it in the book, but I forgot the luxury brand. That had this claim of not your mother's clothing of fashion or something like that. That is a typical example of dissing your existing consumer base in the hope to get a newer consumer base, right? Bad example, bad case study. So you really need to nurture your current consumers who literally are those that build your brand and that generate all the revenue, while trying to appeal to newer consumers that make them more, by making yourself more appealing and more relevant to them. An example I don't sometimes speak about it. I used to work on Harley Davidson. Now, Harley Davidson stands for, being an outlaw, being a rebel and type of something like that. That has very much been built by, the media, movies, and all these kind of things, rather than by Harley Davidson itself. Now, being an outlaw, the imagery is like, an old dude like me, riding in the American West without helmet towards Monument Valley. That's sort of like, and showing my middle finger at society. That's sort of like the outlaw visualization, that the brand has thrived on. ask a 22-year-old nowadays, what does it mean to be an outlaw? And you're going to get very different answers than the imagery associated with Harley currently. So, understanding this new interpretation of the same concept and trying to bring that to life in the communication might be a way for Harley Davidson, for example, to appeal to a younger generation while staying true to its core essence. Now, they just have the problem that their price point is way too high and the quality of their bikes is way too low compared to competitors. But from a branding point of view, that's what you would be looking at trying to do.
Yeah, great examples. Can we get into the neuroscience a little bit, Uli?
Yeah.
Because, like, one of the questions, people will be scratching their heads about is, well, how do you form that association? How does that actually happen in the brain of the consumer that you're trying to reach?
Mhm.
What's the neuroscience there for the brand, or what's the sort of network that the theory they'd have to follow?
Yeah, so the simple way to look at it is from a neuroscience point of view, every brand impression is an imprint in your brand. And what neuroscience told us is that, let's say, a memory can be composed of different elements that are stored in different parts of the brain. So it's not that we have one part in the brain that says all my memories, and then I have to go through there and try to, no. Um, the parts of the brain are determined on is this memory a word or a concept? Is it an experience? Is it an emotion? These type of memories are all stored in different parts of the brain. And every time you have a brain encounter, this physically changes the structure of your brain at a microscopic level, obviously, but you can literally measure an imprint on the brain. So the idea is that, let's say, if I encounter a brand asset, um, uh, all of a sudden, the stronger this network of imprints is of these different elements in my brain, the stronger the link between those different elements, the easier it's going to be for me to recall that brand. So Harley, I hear the roaring of a Harley engine. All of a sudden, all these different parts of my brain light up to bring together the image I have about Harley Davidson. So you can literally measure that. Now, the strength of this imprint depends on a variety of factors. Um, is it an emotional experience? If it is, the imprint is going to be stronger. So the likelihood that you're going to remember it over time is going to be higher. Is it something that is important to you or connected to something that is important to you? The imprint is going to be stronger. Um, if this interaction with the brand is continuous, so you have a consistent number of touch points or a repetition in this context, the imprint is going to be stronger. That's what I meant earlier. Science tells us very clearly what makes for a strong memory and what doesn't. And so the name of the game for the marketer is really to follow those principles, make it emotional, be consistent, tie it to something that is relevant to consumer, which when you think about is all vocabulary that we've heard is relevant in the context of marketing. Now you just have the science to support it. So that allows you to create strong imprints from a scientific point of view. So it's literally if you put your thumb on a clay, if it's emotional, the pressure is going to be higher. If it's consistent, the pressure is going to be higher. So when you remove your thumb, you have a nice and big imprint. If it's irrelevant to me, factual and not emotional, and I see it only once, the clay I have is basically not even have a mark of my finger, that makes me remember it somehow. So uh, there are many different ways to look at it, but the simplest form, that's how the science explains it.
Yeah, I
Because
like.
scientists are probably pulling their hair right now, thinking like, "What an idiot! What is he talking about?" But that's my simple way to describe
Well,
it.
I like it, and I was going to ask you about the different ways that brands should maybe focus on things, because what you're talking about here is the power of emotions, isn't it?
Hmm.
If
Hmm.
something emotionally connects with you or
Hmm.
impacts you or is relevant to your life, that seems to be a big plus when it comes to
Yeah.
making that brand association. And you were giving an example there against something that's just factual but not necessarily making the same level of imprint. Is there a blueprint for the way a brand should think about the type of associations, or is it a mix of
Mhm.
associations that's required? Because you were talking earlier about it's not just in one place in our heads, right? It kind of fires from all different areas and memories, etc.
Yeah, and that's a great question because you shouldn't look at your brand. Like historically, when you look at the origin of the concept of positioning, the idea was really you need to own one word, safety. I think since then we've learned that that's a little too limiting. But what you need to own is a network of associations. So you cannot have one association that is both relevant, provides a benefit, is emotional, and does no. But if you have three or four or five associations, which is basically what your positioning should be, um, then you can look at this mix of associations and determine does it fulfill the criteria it needs. And in the book, I have a scorecard that captures these criteria, or people can also find a free downloadable information to assess whether their positioning or their brand fulfills the criteria required to be relevant in terms of association networks. But yeah, those are things for, it's going to sound silly, right? But does it make clear what category you're playing in? Now, for packaged goods, that's fairly straightforward. For many B2B companies or software companies or IT companies, it's often not clear based on the advertising what they actually offer and, not even what category they're playing is in. So that is an important part. As I said earlier, does it tap into some core drivers that make me be in a specific category? This sounds stupid as well, right? But a friend of mine, for example, hates the term, this is a cost of entry. Often marketers dismiss a benefit because they say, oh, that's a cost of entry. Food needs to taste good. That's a cost of entry, so I don't need to talk about it. Well, the reality is 90% of the food out there, if it's like, let's say, health categories or newer categories, do not taste good. While they try to sell themselves because they're eco-friendly or they have a health benefit. But in bracket, there's always like, and tastes like crap, you know. So understanding the core driver, that taste is a core driver. One brand that did this beautifully is Poppy in the US. It's a soda, soft drink that is based on apple cider vinegar. So it has some prebiotics that are good for your guts. And when you listen to the CEO, I think it just sold for 1 billion or something like that to one of the big soda companies. But when you listen to the CEOs about what makes the success of this brand, yes, the health benefit is an important one to differentiate themselves. But the most important part is the great flavors of this product. And she says very clearly, if it doesn't taste good or if it doesn't taste up to our level, we don't sell it. And it sounds silly, right? Cost of entry. But how many food products have you tried where you're like, that's really not my taste, or no, I'm not interested, or it tastes like crap. It's healthy but doesn't taste good. So core drivers of the category, then the emotional component, etc., etc. There are like five or six, I think, that determine whether a network of association is going to succeed or not.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense in terms of the cost of entry. And sometimes the cost of entry, I know our American colleagues will be talking a lot about table stakes. It's kind of, you've got to pay the price. And we were talking earlier about your company. And I still love the name, by the way, Uli.
Thank
First the
you.
trousers, then the shoes. It's a great name, or FTT, I suppose, for short.
Yep.
Um, but you work with companies, I know, all across the US, North America, across Europe, etc. And you're working a lot when it comes to brand strategy. And I want to ask you a question
Yeah.
from the work that you do, because there must be uh, underappreciated or maybe undervalued opportunities to create some of these really great brand associations that you see. So when you look across sort of the companies, some companies get it really right. You mentioned Poppy, for example, right? But some companies get it so wrong. And I'm just wondering if somebody was to say, look, Louis, what are the undervalued or the unrecognized things that companies should be doing to build better brand associations? What would you say to that, Ernie?
That's an interesting question. So One thing I've learned over the last few years is, and maybe it's because I'm getting more senior or older in the category, is that quite a few brands are successful because their category is successful. So they're successful not because of anything they do, simply for being in the right category at the right time. So it's like the tide rises all the ships, and you see that in the ESG world, in the sustainability world, in the health world, etc., etc. And and often you claim, the success based on the marketing, and you realize your marketing had nothing to do with that. Is you just happen to be at the right time in the right category. Um, One thing that sounds really simple, but that I've noticed, and the truth is, that's one of the main things I help my client do. I like to claim that I'm sort of like a genius that always comes up with a magic formula for my clients that all of a sudden unlocks their growth potential. Is no. One thing I do often is simplify things to their most essential and provide clarity to the organization as a client. So align everyone basically behind the 3 or 4 core associations they need to build in the next 3 to 5 years if they want to succeed. So it's really clarity and the commitment to 3 or 4 fundamental drivers that you want to associate with the brand. It sounds unsexy, it sounds simple, it doesn't have the glamour of brilliant strategy work, but that's generally what I help my client achieve. And the interesting thing is when you get them there, and you could make it sound very complicated, but when you get them there, all of a sudden there's a clarity, there's a sort of not sense of relief, but a sense of empowerment and opportunity on, oh my God, those are all the things we can do now. So it's really simplified and focus on the basics. As unsexy as this may sound, that's ultimately what I try to charge quite a bit of money for to achieve that status.
Yeah, and I think again that's great advice, because ultimately getting back to the basics, the things that actually make a difference here is much more important. And we're kind of talking here, Uli, about things that go right and brand associations that go right. But I want to ask you about the other side of that when things haven't gone well. And the reason I'm saying that is because I was talking to a couple of big organizations now, global companies, where they've made a few missteps. The brand associations haven't been great. They've had
Mhm,
a couple of, things that they wish had gone differently. So they've
mhm.
got some negative brand associations out there. Is there anything that those companies should be doing differently to sort of fix that issue? Sometimes we see new leadership, new
Yeah,
CEOs coming into a company and trying to fix things or rebalance things or launch a new direction for a company.
yeah.
And you've got all this sort of history of associations, mainly good, and then maybe some bad stuff in there. Any
Yeah.
thoughts on that? Because that's a real live sort of scenario that people I think can relate to when it deals with global brands.
Absolutely. Also, when you, let's say, join a new organization, you have a brand, let's say, with has heritage, and you're like, okay, well, our sales have been declining, and we hire you to reverse that. What are you going to do? So, one thing I've learned is what you cannot do is ignore those negative associations. You know, closing your eyes and your ears and putting your head in the sand and saying, la, 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 that doesn't exist. We don't have a sexual harassment lawsuit against us. We're going to ignore that, pretend it doesn't exist or people have a quality perception, negative quality perception with our brand. We're going to pretend that doesn't exist either. So understanding what your current associations are, whether they're negative, neutral, or positive, is a good starting point because if you have a strong positive ones, you can refresh them. If you have neutral ones, you can see can I make them more positive and refresh them as well. Why? Because this is equity you've built. This is memories in the mind of consumers that you just need to reactivate and revive. And then you need to understand your negative ones. And depending on what kind of brand and perception you have, um, there are different strategies to overcome them, right? So let me share you 2 examples of from McDonald's from different geographies around the world. I think it's in Canada and in Sweden. McDonald's had a lot of negative perception with regard to the quality of their food. Now, the food standards and the regulation in Canada and in Sweden are significantly higher than in the US. So the quality of McDonald's in those countries is better than here in the US. So to counter those negative perception, because facts were stronger than stories in that case, they collected all these negative perceptions a consumers had. It's like it's not real meat, it's hyper processed, blah, blah, blah. Um, and to each of these negative perceptions, they came up with a factual answer to prove the contrary. So here's a factual answer to a negative perception. In the US, you can't really do that because the quality is not that good. But what they were able to do is they were able to tap into a human ritual, a human truth that everyone can relate to. And that is that everyone has their order at McDonald's, their favorite order at McDonald's. So in the US, instead of having a rational approach to overcome these negative associations, they used a very emotional approach, which is basically remind people of their personal, orders with that brand. And the truth is, everyone in the US has been at McDonald's many, many times. We all have our stories and memories and associations with the brand. And that was really just about reactivating them. Remember, Simon, you like the, McFish with triple fries and a milkshake chocolate. That's your favorite to-go place. And by tapping into sort of like this emotional association with the brand, they managed to really turn around the brand in the US as well and revive it on a purely emotional level. So here you have one brand in two different geographies. One, it solved its problem rationally because it could, and in the other country, it solved its problem emotionally because it had to, so to say. It didn't have any rational argument to counter those negative perceptions.
So two very great examples there. One very recently, and it's interesting to see that, whether it's the executives, the board, having to make a decision there, what you engage in, how you engage in it, and as you say, is it a silent sorry, is it a loud minority,
Mhm.
or is this truly something that we need to tackle, and how do we tackle that? I think
Yeah.
great examples. And when it comes to examples as well, one of the things I wanted to ask you, when you were writing this book, you've obviously backed it with a lot of science, with a lot of examples. Was that important to you? Because when it comes to sort of evidence-based marketing or evidence-based advertising, everybody seems to have an opinion on what works and what doesn't, but some of this stuff is a little bit it's being churned out without maybe some of the science behind it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that's exactly the truth is I also have a lot of opinion that are not science-based that I think are the greatest opinions in the world. But for this book specifically, I really just and it was actually more work than my first book because writing about your own experience, methodology, and stuff like that, it's easy because you just, systematically put on paper what's in yourself. In this case, I didn't want to make any statement in the book that wasn't either science backed or evidence based. So, really trying to be as factual as I possibly could, which uh, is actually pretty difficult because you sort of like immerse yourself in a gazillion of scientific evidence that then makes it difficult to bubble up again and say, okay, what is it what I'm focusing on? As I mentioned to you before we started this interview, is a couple of months ago, I did a ChatGPT analysis of sort of like 15, 20 very popular marketing books. I'm not going to name them. You can scroll down through my LinkedIn history if you really want to check them out. But um, and what turned out was that 90%, even more, 95% of all the marketing books that we all have in our library, that we all, go and buy because they're the best sellers of the moment, 95% are not evidence or science based. Um, if I'd be mean, I'd say they're basically made up. Or if I'm more generous, I could say they're based on the experience of the writer, which might be very valid and very strong. But they are not science based and they are not um, evidence-based either, which when you think about is mind-blowing, right? Is like marketing directors who have the responsibility of millions and millions of dollars of budgets that they need to allocate to build their business, follow trends, follow gurus, follows, storytellers, buy into their philosophies, apply their philosophies based on zero evidence, zero data to support any of this. And the one I want to highlight, which has been very popular, but it's slowly fading away, it's like Simon Sinek and why, right? There is no evidence out there that shows that a purpose-driven approach um, systematically leads to success. Yes, I can mention a couple of case studies to prove my point in retrospect, but there is no study, no data that shows that uh, a purpose-driven approach will automatically lead to success. Now, there's a lot of data that shows you that a network of association that taps into the core driver of the consumers, has an emotional component, and clearly establishes what category you're in. There's plenty of evidence to show that this will lead to success. So, and I think this is a big trend that we start to see in the US. I think we've seen it already in Europe. Um, I don't know why it's coming, but I bet on that trend that more and more marketing directors will start to think, show me the evidence of, what you're telling me. Show me why that works and how that works. Show me that the proof is in the pudding, so to say, and I'll follow your lead. And it hasn't been the case for the last 20, 30 years, but I hope, well, I see it changing, so I hope indeed it's going to change.
It's a great point. And look, before we run out of time, then, for people that want to have a few more facts and a little bit of science backing up things, how do they go and get a copy of the Science of Brand Associations? They want to win minds, Uli, they want to win markets. Where are you sending people to find out more?
Amazon. Really, just go to Amazon. That's the only place it's being sold. You can get it as an ebook, a paperback, or a hardcover. Um, and the point I just wanted to highlight as well is, so while it's science and evidence-based, it's also very practical. I'm a practitioner. I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a marketing theorist. I'm a practitioner. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, I forget about it. So the book is very practical and very action-oriented and turns basically this evidence and this science into whether it's scorecards, whether it's principles that makes it very easy to apply all that knowledge to your specific brand situation. So um, that's what people also play back to me, and that seems to be part of what the association I have, which is, conceptual, um, taps into theoretical frameworks, but is very practical and pragmatic in his approach to marketing. So just wanted to highlight so people don't think that it's an esoteric piece of, random intellectual masturbation about brand building or something like that. Sorry,
Uh,
use the M word.
Very good. Well, Uli, it's been a real pleasure. The last question I've got for you is people who are listening or watching to this episode around the world, if they want to reach out and connect with you,
Mhm.
find out about your company and the work that you do, and maybe even get you to do some work for them, where's the best place? Is it your website? Is it LinkedIn? Is it a bit of both?
I think the best place would probably be, first of all, I wouldn't say no if someone reaches out and would like to work with me. The best place is really LinkedIn. So Ulli
Mm.
Appelbaum on LinkedIn. Or the website first-the-trousers.com. Right now, the homepage is focused on the new book, but there is also an overview of my client recommendation, the type of work we do, a lot of content about brand strategy and stuff like that. So, yeah, my website or LinkedIn are the two places you can find me.
Well, that's perfect. That's a nice place for us to end on, Uli. We've got the practical practitioner side and we've got the science side covered.
There you
I
go.
just want to thank everybody around the world who's watching or listening to us today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'm going to encourage you to join me back here for some more discussions with creatives and leaders and thinkers, just like Uli. But Uli, it's been great to have you back on the show. Thanks for being a guest again today.
Thanks for having me. And now I'm thinking about what is my third book I can write so that you invite me again, but it may take a few years. So, but thanks for having me. Always enjoy talking to you.
I look forward to it.